I will be using the brush that is included in the palette for the swatches, and I'll be using the eye shader side. So I'm gonna do the swatches based on the themes on the back of the box. Each column represents a character from the movie. So I'm just gonna swatch the Alice look, followed by Mad Hatter, followed by Marana, Erasabeth, and Time. And here's an overall look at the palette so you can see the different color themes. So this one is Alice again, Mad Hatter, Marana, Erasabeth, and Time. Starting out with the first shade, which is Looking Glass, and this is described as a pale pink demi-matte. This color is a very sheer, very light pink shade. It would work well as a highlight because it isn't intense in opacity, so it would work well as an underbrow highlight or inner tear duct highlight. Then we have the shade Reflection, which is described as a soft peach matte. And this one again has pretty sheer color payoff. It would probably work well in the crease. It's a matte, very light peach color. Doesn't really show up too intensely on my skin tone. Then next we have the shade Dormouse, which is described as a warm brown matte with floating gold micro sparkle. And it's a warm caramelly matte brown shade, and it definitely has that very fine micro golden shimmer throughout it. This one actually picks up pretty decently in pigmentation. It builds up decently, but it has a lot of loose powder falling off, so I can see fallout happening with this shade. And then last up for Alice, we have the shade Metamorphosis, which is described as a vibrant periwinkle blue with micro sparkle. And this one is a beautiful blue shade, and it has turquoise micro shimmer to it. It's not as pigmented as I expected. It's really not showing up that well on my skin. And it builds up a little bit, but again, it's such a loose color that I'm getting a lot of fallout. I don't know if it's maybe the brush that I'm using. So here are those 4 shades from the Alice theme. And I think I'm gonna switch brushes to see if I get better color payoff from the other colors, because these didn't really show up using the brush that was included in the palette. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch to my Kat Von D Shade and Light eyeshadow brush, and I'm gonna use the stiffer end of the brush for the swatches. Moving on to the Mad Hatter column, the first shade we have up is Hatter, and it's described as a vibrant green with tonal micro sparkle. This one is a medium tone grassy green, and it has very fine, again, it looks like silver and a little bit of turquoise shimmer throughout it. It's actually a very pretty color, and it has decent color payoff. Then next to that we have the shade Gone Mad, which is described as an aubergine with pink iridescent pearl. This one is a deep dark dirty purple, and it does have that very fine micro shimmer. It's a more pink micro shimmer. It's actually a very nice color as well, and the pigmentation is pretty decent. Next is the shade Paradox, which is described as a vibrant orange with gold pearl. This one definitely doesn't come off as intense as I expected it to. It's just a coppery orange shade with golden shimmer. It looks like a lot of other similar shades on the market. There's nothing too impressive about it. I really expected more from this shade, to be honest. And then we have the shade Cake, which is described as a saturated blue pink with silver micro shimmer. I think the color descriptions are hyping up these colors way too much, because this is a very subdued blue tone pink, and it does have silver shimmer to it and a little bit of a blue reflection, but it's really not that intense. I do have to build it up to get any color payoff, so I'm not too impressed by this shade either. But as a pink, really you probably don't want it to be too intense, so it probably will be more wearable for people that are afraid of bright in your face color. So again, here are those 4 shades from the Mad Hatter column. And overall, they have decent pigmentation. It could be the brush, it could be the colors, but I'm not too impressed by these shades. The green one and the dark purple one actually turned out pretty well. And then the other 2 are so-so, with the orange one really letting me down because I expected so much more from it. I should mention that I did try to build up the color of these first 4 using the Kat Von D brush, and they still look pretty much the same. So it's not the brush that's causing the colors to come off sheer, it's really the colors themselves. They come off a little bit less pigmented than I really expected looking at them in the palette. Now we're moving on to the Murana column, and the first shade up is Lily, which is described as an opal pink pearl. And this one is a very sheer opalescent pinky color, and it's actually very beautiful. This one is definitely more of a accent color versus a full-on lid color, but it's a nice color and it does look really beautiful on my skin tone. Then we have the shade Duchess, which is described as a peach with pink shift and micro sparkle. I'm really having to build up this color to get it to show up on my skin. It looks like the Lily shade next to it, just with a peachier undertone, but it does reflect pink again and it has golden shimmer through it. But I don't know, like the Lily shade, which is a sheer shade, actually shows up much better than this Duchess shade, which I had to like pack on color for you to see it on my skin like that. So I'm not impressed by that shade at all. Then we have the shade Kingdom, which is described as a copper bronze pearl. This is a very light bronze shade. Actually has decent color payoff, and it's an interesting color because it has a little bit of pink and then a lot of gold to it, so it does have nice dimension. But I've seen other colors similar to this. It's not that impressive either. And then last up in this column we have Chessboard, which is described as a medium brown matte. And this one is just a matte medium tone brown. It's more of a warm tone brown. It will definitely work well in the crease to build up dimension. And it does apply smoothly with decent color payoff. So I can see this being a very nice color. And again, here are those 4 shades from the Murana column swatched on my arm. I'm not too impressed with the first 2 of those shades. The other 2 are decent and they're very pretty shades, and the matte actually performed really well. I do like the uniqueness of the Kingdom shade. It's a bronze with pink and gold, so it does look very pretty. But again, these are just regular run-of-the-mill neutral shades. So again, here are those 12 shades swatched on my arm. I am not thoroughly impressed with all of these shades. A few of them do perform really well in the swatches and they did apply nicely. A couple of them had some serious fallout, and then a couple of them applied pretty sheerly. Moving on to the Irascible column, we're starting out with the shade Heads Will Roll, and this is described as a vibrant turquoise with gold micro sparkle. This one actually applies pretty decently and it builds up nicely, and that gold sparkle isn't too chunky, so it isn't giving me too much fallout, but just be mindful that you might get some fallout of that shimmery sparkle. But it applied pretty well and it has decent pigmentation and it's a very pretty color. Then we have the shade Bandersnatch, which is described as a deep teal matte. And this one is coming off pretty well for a matte color. It is a little choppy, but it builds up decently. And this one is more of a deep teal blue shade. It's more of a blue with a little touch of green to it. I wouldn't describe it as a full-on teal. It's more like a matte deep blue. And then we have the shade Salazen Grum, which is described as a metallic crimson. This one is a shimmery red tone copper shade, and the pigmentation is pretty nice on this one and it builds up beautifully as well. And then last up in this column we have the shade Royal Flush, which is described as a pale beige shimmer. This one is more of a silvery beige color on my skin. It has decent pigmentation considering that I just thought it was going to be a sheer shade. It actually has nice pigmentation, but it's definitely a shimmer shade, so it has a little bit more of a chunky finish to it. And again, here are those 4 shades in that column, and I'm actually very impressed with all 4 of these shades. They applied nicely, they have great pigmentation, they built up well. Actually, this row so far is my favorite row because it performed so well. Moving on to the Time column, the first shade we have up is Time, and it's described as a black navy satin with soft iridescent micro sparkle. And oh my god, shut it down. Shut it down. This color is everything. I'm done. I'm done here. I actually got the palette for that shade because I swatched it and I was done, and that's the shade that I'm like, you know what? I have to have that one. I have to. I just have to. Beautiful shade. Great pigmentation. It's not like a flat matte black or like a gunmetal shade or like a silver shade. It's not plain. It has dimension. There is iridescence to it, like different levels of shimmer. There's a gold shimmer, blue shimmer, purpley shimmer from what I can tell. It's just so pretty. I can't. Moving on to the other shades that just won't live up to this one. The next shade is Dream On. It's described as a metallic purple silver. And this one is the one that I was least impressed with when I swatched it. It is a very sheer and it's really just shimmer. And I guess that's what I was expecting from the Royal Flush shade when it said shimmer, because it's literally just glitter and with a very sheer, like dirty plum purple base. This is definitely an accent shade, or it's just a complete flop and you can just not even look at this one in the palette. You could just call this one a wash. Then we have Chronosphere, which is described as a metallic deep bronze. This one is another beautiful one. It's rich, it's pigmented, it's smooth. It's a really beautiful bronzy shade. It's actually very gorgeous. And then last up we have the shade Mirror, which is described as a gray taupe satin shade. And this one is just what it says, a gray taupe, and it's in a satin finish, and it has decent color payoff, nice pigmentation. I just expected Mirror to be this intense metallic shimmery shade, but I guess they decided to downplay it a bit, but it actually does apply very well. And again, here are those 4 shades, and the 2 shades Time and Chronosphere, oh my god, they're so beautiful. They kind of win the palette for me, but I know not everybody's gonna be won over by a couple of shades in the palette. You have to like more than half the palette. The shade Dream On is the ultimate flop in the palette. It's just, I don't know what that was meant to be, but it really is just like an accent shade, or even just a shade that you don't even bother to use. And then Mirror is actually a very beautiful silver shade, like a silver taupe shade, so it's also very pretty. And here's a look at the final 8 shades in the palette, and I think these 2 rows are the best performers in the palette. Most of these shades, except for that Dream On shade, performed really well. They applied really well, they had good pigmentation, and they're just unique, like not unique, but they're like different shades that really add a punch to a look. I really fell in love with these 2 columns, and they kind of took the cake for me. And I will deal with the other shades, because the other shades aren't terrible, they're just not my favorite, but these 2 columns really sell it for me, and I'm really impressed by all of these shades except for that one Dream On shade.